Hi, this is Amy from Be Well Clinic, and today I want to talk to you about a concept that I have been recently talking to people about to help them better understand what their digestive system is doing or maybe not doing as well as it could. This I'm calling understanding your digestive fire, and maybe you have low digestive fire. So people with low digestive fire have symptoms like they have a huge plate of food because they were very hungry, but you start eating it and a quarter of the way done, you're full. You can't eat any more. But an hour later, you're starving again. Maybe you eat food, but it just feels really heavy and it's just not really going anywhere. A lot of people, I find, don't think that they have digestive issues if they are not seeing undigested food in their stool. But my experience is a lot of people with clear digestive issues have digested stools. By the time it gets to the end, it looks fine. It looks normal. Sometimes constipation is present. Sometimes loose stools are present, but sometimes there's perfectly formed stools. It's not that the body down at the end of your digestive tract doesn't know what to do. It's the fact that your body at the top can't efficiently do the digesting very well. So food is getting broken down but not absorbed into your body, which actually is what provides nutrition for you. Some digestive symptoms in terms of how your appetite is or how much you're eating, but other symptoms would be fatigue. You're not catching up. You're taking foods that are rich in supplements or supplements themselves, and your vitamin C or your vitamin A or whatever is not getting better. You still feel deficient, you're still seeing tons of problems. And so maybe your body is not breaking down and able to absorb those foods very well. Maybe it's actually that they're just passing through. Of course, we don't want to do that. That's not efficient. It's not going to help us. So here is kind of this metaphor that I heard, and then I've kind of expounded on that has helped me help people understand. And I'm giving this as an idea of how you might be able to figure out what your digestive system is doing. So, in general, low digestion, poor digestion, congested stomach, that's a word that I'll use if you see me as a patient, stomach congestion, sluggish digestion. And when we say that, I'm talking about the stomach and the liver. So this upper digestive system and how that system is functioning. When that is not functioning well, we won't get good emulsification of fats, so you won't be absorbing them, which, by the way, leads to pale skin that is translucent. So we have visible veins on the temples, often on the eyelids. That's showing we're not absorbing enough fat. If you're eating a ton, absorption is the problem. Proteins. We need enzymes to break down proteins. If you are not getting enough stomach acid, the enzymes don't get turned on when that food comes out of the stomach into the small intestines. This is what we really talk about enzyme issues, protein digestion, but that problem can start with bile flow. The liver may be congested and we not have good bile flow, or the stomach acid could be low, which could be from zinc deficiency, vitamin A deficiency, vitamin B deficiency, just poor stomach acid production for other reasons as well. And we can do things about all of those. The last thing is our stomach acid is high, our bile flow is going, then our enzymes will turn on well. Awesome, now we're gonna digest food. So our goal is to help your body do all of those things. If it's not yet able to do those things, we need to help it. You can do a full actual just help, right? So you can take stomach acid supplements. You can take pancreatic enzyme supplements. You can take ox bile so that you're literally just taking the bile along your food that you're maybe not making or flowing yourself. That can be a temporary solution, but my goal is, well, how do we get your body from not working to working? And there's a lot of things we do, and some people's bodies correct well, but there's a select number of people who this is really tricky and they're not correcting very easily. And this is where I have this concept of a digestive fire. So picture your stomach as a little furnace. We're going to talk a lot about campfires in this metaphor, but really we're building a fire in a furnace. So in the fire or the furnace that we're building, we have some kindling, right? We don't start with huge logs because we don't have lighter fluid. So we're going to build it from a match. So we have little pieces of kindling, so leaves and pine needles and dry fluff of plants and things like that. So we make a little bit of a base. We put some little bit bigger sticks in, right? And then we light it with a match. Maybe we have paper, whatever. That then, to build your fire, what do? You add slightly bigger sticks until you can add big logs. Cool, that's what it works. When your fire is built and it is roaring, and this is why we talk about it being in a furnace, because a furnace or a wood stove or whatever, you are going to be able to set it and leave it. So overnight, you may have a good roaring fire and it stays lit through the night, keeping you warm until the morning, which is very, very correct and accurate description in the metaphorical sense about our adrenals and our kidneys and what Chinese medicine calls the triple warmer. So when we have this significant heater that's just keeping us literally warm, it's digesting our food, it's making a lot of things function well. If that's warm, it's really easy. You just put more fuel in, it can be very big fuel, and it just keeps stoking the fire, it keeps it going strong. But what if you don't? What if your fire has gone cold? What if it's brand new? This is where we're kind of gonna coax or build that fire up. Now, if you think about foods in terms of types of material, so we have our leaves and sticks and pine needles and all of that are going to be small foods. So the first food that comes to mind when I think of that is carbohydrates. Mostly in the forms of breads because it's so pre-digested, right? We've ground the wheat, they're so broken up. Fruit, probably. Vegetables to some extent, especially root vegetables, especially if they are cooked. And there's a surprise one, which is meat stock. So when we have all of these kindling, we want to start with that. And this is what I love about the GAPS diet. You are starting with very small kindling foods, assuming that everyone who's doing GAPS has some degree of digestive difficulty or problems. So we have these small kindling foods like meat stock, egg yolks, dairy fat, things like that, because those are what's going to start building that fire when it is weak. Now, some people do GAPS diet and mistakenly think that it's supposed to be keto at the same time. So they don't do a lot of vegetables, they don't do root vegetables, they avoid everything, they just do chicken stock, maybe they don't put any vegetables in at all, no spices, barely any salt. And those people are not going to be successful to stay on those early stages of GAPS because that's not actually what everyone needs. A lot of people, meat stock itself is very kindling, right? You take a big log and you slice it into tiny little slivers of logs to put on your fire, right? But some people, that's not enough. We need some carbohydrates, which we can get from carrots, which we can get from a winter squash. And so one of the things I've been switching my thinking when I'm talking to someone is assessing and helping them learn how to assess their own digestive fire. If your fire is really low, because some people come with other digestive issues, not low fire. If your fire is really low, you're going to need more carbohydrates, which don't just mean breads, right? Carbohydrates are fruit, which would not be on intro, but more root vegetables, more things like that. So we have our carbohydrates in the stock. We have our amino acids, which have been simmered out from the cooking process. We have fat. We have egg yolks very quickly when you get to stage 2, right? So these foods are so building to the fire. If you're not doing GAPS, you may find that you like a little bit of, sourdough bread or, certain crackers or breads or whatever. If your goal is to build your fire up and eventually we want to use big logs are going to be like protein, a steak, a big marrow bone, some really fatty cuts of meat, things like that, right? So if we want some big logs on our fire, which is how we have a hot fire, how we have a sustained fire, we have to start with kindling first. Okay, let's go to pure fire metaphor now. So we have a fire. It is small, and you put a giant log on it. What's it going to do? Put the fire out, okay? If you put a giant log on a tiny flame, we're done. So that, I feel like I have seen people experience that situation. And those people need to not be eating meat so much. They need to be eating more stock and more cooked vegetables and more ground pieces of meat or even puree soups, which we don't want to do forever, but that may be helpful right at this time. But the goal is to stoke the fire. The other cool thing is your fire automatically gets stronger through the day. The way that our body is set up, we will get a stronger fire or stronger digestive ability as the day goes on. So in the morning, you may be only able to do meat stock or let's say toast or whatever, but then by the evening you can actually eat steak and potatoes. If you're able to do that, when we set up our body to go to sleep keeping that fire strong, then the next morning we can be a little stronger. So my whole goal is, how do we keep the fire getting stronger in your body so that at some point it's roaring, it is stable, you can put anything in it and it will be fuel. So hopefully that makes sense. The last thing, and then I want to kind of summarize what we're saying. The last thing is dairy. So a lot of people have confusion about dairy. Is dairy mucus producing? Is dairy cooling? Is dairy good for you? And Chinese medicine would label most dairy, not all dairy products, but most dairy products as a cooling food or as a smothering food or as a dampening food. Those don't sound good in a fire, right? Definitely not when your fire is weak. This is why I think a lot of people have trouble with dairy, and it's one of the first things we have trouble with when digestive issues start showing up. But it's not always an allergy, right? And people get tested and they don't have an allergy. What's going on? I think it's this dampening effect. So I'm thinking of it like a piece of moss or a wet paper towel or something. A wet paper towel is not a big deal on a bonfire. You throw a wet paper towel in, even in a campfire, and it just goes up, right? It dries out and flames in a matter of seconds. If you put a wet paper towel on a tiny little flicker of a flame from a new fire, you're going to smother it and put it out. So I think what's important is not what foods to do, but almost what foods win. Dairy may not be good for you in the beginning of the day, but it could be just fine at the end of the day. Fermented dairy is going to be more broken up and there's more enzymes which help enliven the fire, because we're going to get to like fire starters in a second. The cultured food, the cultured dairy, is going to give you some help to digest it, right? And that's why people can tolerate it better than just a milk, especially pasteurized milk. That's how I've started really thinking of dairy. I've not really thought of it as a mucus producing food or a like wet food, but like, what is your stomach acid or fire status? And then can you handle dairy right now or not? And that can be a meal by meal basis for some people. So the last thing is, what are some fire starters besides just starting with kindling? So we can put lighter fluid on it, right? And I kind of think of hydrochloric acid or even enzymes as lighter fluid. So we can put some lighter fluid on the fire, which will get it going, but still you have to have the right type of material for that fire to catch and to burn. You can do bitters, digestive bitters. You can do sauerkraut juice, beet kvass. 10 minutes before a meal starts triggering the bile release, which will trigger stomach acid production, which will hopefully trigger enzyme release as well. Some people just have really tired systems and the enzymes aren't releasing very well at all, and they need the kindling more often. But our goal is a roaring fire, right? Think of people who are really well. They are warm all the time. They can go without 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 layers of clothing. They're warm all the time. They are able to sleep well. They are able to wake up hungry. They are able to eat meals. They usually don't need snacks in between meals. And all of those things I can see partly reflecting their strong fire. There's fuel keeping them warm. It's burning efficiently. They can use big logs when they eat. They can have big meals. They digest it well. They don't feel heavy or sluggish afterwards, and they can just move on through their day with feeding their fire a few times a day. So it's a cool metaphor to do. And again, dairy's not a problem. Dairy puts a dampening effect, which will only affect a low fire. It's not going to affect a high fire. When the dampening effect happens, what happens? Smoke. Mucus and or skin issues are kind of like the smoke from the fire. And this is where I've heard of digestive fire before, but the person talking about it talked in connection with mucus and dairy. And the idea that dairy in a weak digestive fire is going to produce mucus. Again, not the mucus problem, and maybe not a problem at all, because mucus removes toxins. So it's not even a negative thing, but it's what's happening, right? It's why it's happening kind of idea. So if we have dairy coming into a system that is cold, weak fire, whatever, we dampen it, we create smoke, and we're going to create a lot more mucus than a person who eats dairy who has a hot fire. You're not going to get that mucus production or skin things, right? Because mucus and skin are just things coming out, right? So some people are skin people, some people are mucus people, some people are lung people, and the toxins just go out that way more than for other people. So that's kind of the idea of this. So my challenge to you, or my recommendation to you, is to look at your digestive fire. Look at your children's digestive fire. Notice their eating habits. Do they eat really poorly in the morning or really hungrily in the morning? Some people are really other things are off, so they actually eat better in the morning, and then that food, usually they're eating the wrong foods, like they're reacting to foods. And then through the day, they get more bloated and less hungry, but in the morning, it's kind of cleared up and they feel better. Most people actually have weak breakfast, right? So many people don't want to eat breakfast, can't eat breakfast in the morning, and then by lunch and dinner, they're ravenous and they eat a ton of food. And then they go to bed and they don't feel good because they ate too late and all this problem. So what if all of that can be solved by paying attention and on purpose building and stoking our digestive fire so it is more consistent through the day? So that's really what my recommendation is for you. Observe yourself, observe your children, and see what is happening through the day. What is the patterns? When you eat dairy with this perspective in mind, and you have some mucus production from dairy, oh, how's your digestive fire? Oh yeah, it was weak, that makes sense. I was sick. Digestive fire definitely goes down most of the time when people are going through an illness cleansing process. So that makes sense that there's more mucus when you have dairy, but it doesn't mean dairy is a problem, right? It's a different perspective. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that you can take that. Please leave feedback about this, especially parents who are observing this in your kids. I'm really excited to be able to share this. So please help us, the community, understand how parents, what are you observing in your kids that helped you know where their digestive fire was? I have some ideas, but I've only recently been looking at this. So definitely help out the community. Let us know what you're seeing. Does this make sense? What questions do you have about how this is all working? So I hope this is helpful, and we will see you next time to learn a little bit more about how to take care of your body.